second being your plan, and the third being basically the market. Those three things sort of came up. On top of everything, I would say in terms of people, you have to have initiative. It's often said that an entrepreneur is smart enough to think of the idea of how to make this business, but sort of not smart enough to realize it's impossible to do. So it bridges the gap between figuring it out and actually making it happen is a lot of initiative, a lot of stick-to-itiveness, and almost amnesia. Because every day you're going to come home and some days head's going to be so big you can barely fit through the door because you had success. The next day you're going to be so low you go right underneath the door jam. And you've got to be able to deal with that on a day-to-day basis. I personally have been lucky to have a very solid foundation at home. I've been very fortunate, and that's important because when you start a business, you are going to be tested. So I would say what the most important factor is your intestinal fortitude. How determined and how driven you personally are if you are the entrepreneur. I do think there's a lot to Mr. Montgomery saying about founder's disease and getting a mentor and stuff like that, so I'm sure those questions are going to come up later. But the idea of putting your ego aside and never say die, never quit. That'd be
Thank you. We're going to go on to the second general question, which is a variation of the first one, and that is, what are the key success factors involved in growing a venture into a business, and how do they differ from the key success factors at startup?
So I think one really interesting thing that's come up already in this panel is, and this ties into the question for me, is that you'll get a lot of advice. This is when you're starting a business and when you're growing a business. You get a lot of advice, and already, I'm advocating, don't plan, don't do any planning, just go out and do it. Monica is saying, actually, kind of planning is kind of important, and of course we're both right. But the point I want to make here is you get a lot of advice, it will often be conflicting, and it's up to you as an entrepreneur to say, okay, I hear that advice, and yeah, I agree with it, and I'm going to act on it, or no, I disagree with that actually, and here's why. And you've got to have faith in your own convictions, because very, very smart people will give you very conflicting advice. So you've got to believe in your convictions and act on them. I would say one piece of advice that I would always encourage you to ignore is the people that say no. When we launched KIVAZip 18 months ago, everyone told us it wouldn't work. When that family launched Kiva in 2005, everyone told them it wouldn't work. And we stuck at it despite those naysayers, and it feels really, really good now, 18 months later, or in Kiva's case, 8 years later, to look back and say, wow, look what we've achieved, and aren't we glad that we didn't listen to those people that said no. So that's the first point on advice. And the second point is to take things one step at a time. I get really daunted. We have aggressive plans to grow KIVAZip. We're going to do about 2,000 loans, micro loans, to financially excluded entrepreneurs this year, 2,000. In 2 or 3 years' time, we want that to be 50,000 a year. And I have no idea how we're gonna get there. It's an extremely ambitious, aggressive plan. But one great piece of advice that Matt gave me is don't worry too much about that 50,000 right now, because we'll learn so many lessons over the next 2 years that our strategy will change and be iterated. What we should really be focusing on the step that's in front of us right now. So rather than being too daunted and too fearful by a 50,000 number, let's concentrate on getting 2,000 this year and 10,000 next year, and really take things one step at a time.
Hello again. Well, I can tell you in terms of growth, which is for me the key word within the federal government, it is constantly changing. So the bigger picture here is to be able to identify your position in relation to doing business within the federal government. Identifying your government customers would be key. Asking 2 primary key questions. particular field, this procurement arena, because at one point, the federal government was pretty much the procurement arena that a lot of small businesses were coming to, and the numbers have tripled. So as a lot more businesses were moving away from the private sector, they were coming to the federal government. So a lot of different areas of resources have popped up from, since that time. So, take, again, advantage of those free resources and determine where you are in your particular company. The time is today, so you think, am I ready to do business as a prime contractor? I mean, directly with that federal customer, or am I going to be the subcontractor to that prime, working with that federal agency customer? Or am I going to be the sub to the subcontractor? So again, it's just having that determination and figuring out, where you are in your business in order to be able to do business, and following the money is definitely primary and key. And definitely being proactive, because I always say out of sight, out of mind, and eventually out of a job. So you have to definitely be out there and be proactive. So thank you.
So I guess we can go in the same order. The original question. I think a lot of what Lori says applies to the commercial sector as well. It's not just specifically to the GSA. If I could just very quickly summarize what she said, it's learning how to sell. She described a bunch of questions that you want to present to the government. They apply just as well when you're selling to Wells Fargo, if you're trying to sell educational software to San Francisco University or whatever your audience is. So the idea is, going back to what I said earlier in the first question, once you've done this market validation, the next phase of creating a success factor for growing your business is learning how to sell. So go out there and figure out not just what your value proposition is, which you did in the first phase when you launched your business, but now how do you reach your customers? Do you reach them through the internet? Do you have to do it face-to-face? What does it cost to actually reach them? Do you reach them directly? Do you reach them indirectly? There's all kinds of strategies around how you actually get in front of your customers, and that process, that sales and learning process, is very critical. Once you figure that out, then you can go out and raise money, whether it's venture capital, or it's a family, or getting a loan, or what have you, because now you've got a formula for success. You know how to sell, you know what you're selling, you know what it costs to get out in front of the market, and you know what the return is on all those dollars spent. Then you can present now as a business case to whoever is going to give you that money. So figure that out as the next phase, and you'll be in a really good position.
When our keynote speaker was mentioned about the Hewlett Packard, made me think of Wells Fargo and what we consider employees as a competitive advantage. I think that's, for me, is one of the key factors of what the company is all about. And happy employees are the ones that are added to our bottom line, which Wells Fargo likes to see. It is your profits. That's one of the, once we kind of get everything squared away and we are on our way, one of the things that businesses sometimes forget is those employees are the ones that are bringing you where you're at, where your success is happening. The other thing is that, which ties in really with everything that we all are talking about, is going back and rethinking everything and reevaluating and making sure that you are thinking 2 steps ahead, not what has happened in the past or it's happening right now, but what is the future? What are we looking at? If you were a business owner 2005, 2006, you'd be expect what has happened in the last 5 years, and those are the ones that are survivors, and they're the ones who are still achieving their goals. So being aware of all of that up front at all the time, and not forgetting that things change at all time for our businesses.
So the question now, what are the success factors of growing a venture? I would say it all starts with sort of knowing yourself. In Mr. Montgomery's opening address, he talks about getting a mentor. And that is one of the most important pieces of the pie. See, when you're building a company, or when you have a startup environment and you're trying to grow, it's sort of like, who, by show of hands, who has ever seen a Superman cartoon? Anyone? Okay, good. So this is good analogy. When you're an entrepreneur, no one's asking you to be Superman. And that's where people get in trouble. So being an entrepreneur is a little bit more like being Batman. And you're really not creating, what you're trying to do is you're trying to create the Hall of Justice. Everyone remember the Hall of Justice? Where you have Aquaman, Batman, Wonder Woman, all these, okay. So the idea is Batman is a little stronger because he's got Robins, because he's trying to do everything by himself. And the most important part, in my opinion, to grow a venture is, yes, of course, you need to have your plan. And you need to take that plan, and then when the next month goes by, you need to replan it. The next month, you need to do another plan. Then you replan your plan. Then you replan your plan, replan more. No doubt about it. You need to do market traction. You need to talk to 300 people, and then 300 more. But you've got to look and make sure, know yourself. Who are you? If your competitor is attacking you underwater, man, you got to send Aquaman. Superman doesn't swim. He does just about everything else, right? You're sitting in an environment today where you have the city of San Jose coming up and saying, whatever we can do to help, we want to help. I personally have worked with Work Diffusion, which is a division of the Office of Economic Development. I personally have. I personally went to SCORE. SCORE is it's not a city organization, it's a quasi-city organization. I guess it's a good enough definition for right now, where there is a group of retired people that are willing to help you. If you're an entrepreneur and your first time, you're just starting, and you don't use SCORE, shame on you. There's an entrepreneurial center at the city of San Jose, which I also took advantage of. I took advantage of any resource I could. When people stand up and say we want to help, take their help. After the opening remarks by Mr. Montgomery, one young woman said, if I want to find a mentor, how do I do that? The answer is any way you can. This is more than just a lifestyle. You have to be passionate about it. You got to try just about everything. One final point. This also, you want to build a team. This team isn't just the people that work with you. This could be your board members, board of advisors. I wrote notes on reading them. Groups that you get along with. There's an international flair going on. I personally am involved with Irish Technology Leadership Group, great San Jose group, IDA. It's a group called Interport you can get involved with if you want to be international. Olivia works with them. The issue is you just never stop. Join other boards. Volunteer time for the city. What you get out of it is what you take back. You have to pay it forward a little bit. But you've got to build your team and ultimately know yourself. If you're not the CEO of the group, then hire a CEO. There's no ego involved. And I believe that's what Mr. Montgomery was talking about, the founder's disease, and I'm gonna use that. Because you need to get a mentor and get help with everything you do.
Thank you. Before we go to the Q&A session, I'm going to ask each of the panel members a very specific question relevant to their business. We start
interesting